Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Caffeinated Christian Podcast. I'm your producer, Bradley, the man with no last name, and I'm joined by Ryan, Willert, and Pastor Mike Rigglesworth. And today we're going to be talking about self-identity and how that pertains to the biblical worldview and the personal worldview. So we're going to be looking at these terms of how you can find your identity, how you can find your personality, both in Christ and in the world. And we're going to be looking at this new idea of being able to choose what your identity is and being able to identify as different people or as different personalities that don't pertain to what you normally would be classified as. And we're going to be breaking that down and kind of looking at that at a deeper level. So we hope you enjoy, and let's get right into it. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of What is Truth? Today we are tackling the subject of identity, and I think that's a big topic in the world right now. I feel like it's impossible to escape. When I was researching the information for this episode, I clicked on a Joe Rogan podcast for entertainment, and it was Theo Von, who's a comedian, a redneck comedian.
Oh yeah,
and I was just watching it because I saw a clip on YouTube and it looked really funny. But then the next thing I know, they're talking about gender identity and finding your identity in the world and everything like that. And while researching, I couldn't break away from it. I kept finding more stuff, and then these news sources would reference other sources, and it just kind of was a spiral effect for how many different forms of identity I could find.
right.
Well, if we don't offend somebody in this episode,
We're not doing our job.
We're not doing our job.
Also, side note, Joe Rogan podcast with Theo Von is not the scholarly source you want to quote. Just throwing that out to you guys.
That I did not get information from that podcast.
Bradley sent us a page of just quotes from Joe Rogan.
That was not his primary source.
All Theo Von
peer
quotes.
reviewed.
It was not his primary source of researching this topic of identity.
Yeah. But I mean, if you can find people talking about that in that place, that was the most unlikely spot for me to find information about gender identity. Mm-hmm. It's a redneck comedian and a podcast host who interviews everybody.
Okay,
it was just a comedy duo.
All right, so you answered my first question, Bradley. When we're talking about identity, are we talking about sexual identity, gender identity politics?
Yeah. So I think that so first off, I wanted to answer what is identity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because I think that if you just say gender identity, well, if you don't know what identity is, it's kind of hard to answer. It's gender blank is essentially what you're asking. Yeah. And so I think that identity as a whole ties into all the other offsprings of it. So answering what identity actually is first is important to answer what gender identity is and what identity politics are, because I think identity politics is just an offshoot of gender identity, and gender identity is just people trying to find their identity as a whole.
Yep. So what is identity? How would we define it?
So I kind of picked up a few different big approaches to identity that we can find in the world, and so I kind of broke them down as to what that kind of looks like, and then I kind of broke them down to an example of why I don't think it would necessarily work all the time. So the first thing I would say is identifying as a man / a woman. That's the most common form of identity that we find today, or that we found in the last however long humans have been around.
I think before you even go there, I think identity answers the question, who am I? Right? That's what the core of identity actually is, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
but you have to understand how to find what you are. You can't just, and I think that's one of the big issues today is people don't know what they are. Mm-hmm. And so, during my research, I was looking at different sources and everything like that. And one of the big things that was being talked about was that if you can get people to question what something as basic as gender is, something that we've understood for tens of thousands of years, you can get them to question what truth is as a whole. Because if the most basic of things are no longer true, then nothing is true. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very important to start with the most basic forms of what you are and how can we define that.
So Brad, let me ask you a question then.
Sure.
So you start off with this identity of gender, I should say, right? We'll throw that into that category.
Yeah, and I think it's the most basic form of it.
Most basic form, or or even I should say the most sort of popular at this day and age form. Would you agree with that? The most talked about?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
What do you think that these sort of popular and deep topics such as gender identity, do you think people ground their entire identity into one category?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
Right.
so.
And that was my point too. Like when you're talking about gender identity, you're talking about sexual identity, you're talking about politics. It is they've linked their whole self to that thing. This is a fundamental part, if not the part of who they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the primary reason why we're seeing this is because people have picked one thing to identify with. So, like, let's just use LGBTQ people, for example, right here. They will identify their whole life with their sexual orientation. So, like, if somebody says that they are gay, their whole life is them being gay in their mind.
Okay.
So
that one thing literally defines every other category of identity.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. It's like a lens almost. Like they look at everything else through that one single lens. And so one of the biggest issues that I think that Christians or the church as a whole is finding is that, and the church is doing what they should be doing, and they're attacking the sin and not the sinner, which is the correct form that we should have been taking a couple of years ago. But the problem is that people have identified their whole identity on the sin. And so what's happening is when the church is going after the sin,
It's like they're going after the whole being.
they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
However, it's not working because the people that are identifying with the sin have essentially become the sin.
Well, and they see it as a personal attack on
And then
them.
they see it as a personal attack on them.
It's not.
And it's not. It's the Christians are trying to do the right thing, and their mindset is right. But the problem is that they're attacking the wrong solution. They should be trying to increase what people view as identity versus taking that one identity away.
So you think the Christian should start with almost two things technically. One, stating this is not your whole being. Two, refocusing sort of the main category of identity, which defines everything else.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right on point there.
Okay.
So these next three are just like kind of ideas of what culture will say defines identity, and they are one singular thing. So the first one I have is identifying as a man or a woman. And one of the big things that we see in modern America, especially, I don't know so much about other countries, but more like Western ideology, is that the two sexes are interchangeable. So my question would come in as the form of, if they're interchangeable, what's the purpose of differentiating them?
Right.
Like if a man and a woman, if man equals A and A equals woman, like, you know what I mean? Like man equals woman. It doesn't make sense to differentiate them if they're the same thing.
And they argue that this is what I understand of the argument. I'm not well read in this particular category, but I know enough to know that like they identify gender and sex as a totally distinct category.
Yes, they are
so
two different things.
Somehow, like historically, we saw sex and gender connected. They were not distinct. They were interchangeable. Like if you have male parts, you're a male. If you have female parts, you're a female.
Okay, so they saw maleness identical to the biology.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, what I would say in that regard, there are masculine qualities and there are feminine qualities. Men tend to have more masculine qualities. Females tend to have more feminine qualities. Right? But it's not that men can't have feminine qualities, and
Right.
females can't have masculine qualities.
Yeah,
Right.
that's actually
So-
what I just had here as well, which was, if a man, we'll just say a man, exhibits more feminine qualities.
No, when you say man, are you referring to
I'm-
gender or biological sex here?
I'm referring to an actual man,
Okay.
a grounded in reality man. What has been a man for
so you're
countless centuries.
I just want to, for the listeners, you're defining
Yes, I'm defining
the old definition.
an
where
old
it's-
definition.
Okay.
I'm not
Classical
Classical.
definition.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason I'm doing that is because the new definitions change every single hour. There are hundreds of genders currently, and there are millions of sexes currently.
Okay.
And there will be more tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'm going to stay with what has been true, or has been defined for years,
Okay.
because I think that we can explain what's going on better with it
Okay.
and not confuse people. That's the
Okay.
objective.
So we're
is not to be
defining
confusing.
this idea of gender as the biological sex.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. What I would say is that going on the basis of what we've always done and said that, or culture has said more likely that men exhibit masculine qualities and that women exhibit feminine qualities. One of the big things now is that if you identify, or if you start off as male in biology, but then you have feminine qualities, the world will say, well, then you must be a female because you identify with feminine qualities more than you identify with men. So the big question to ask is, if you have a feminine quality, are you less of a man? Or if you exhibit a masculine quality, are you less of a female?
Right.
So my big example here is Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is the manliest guy.
Even
you can
what is
find.
he now,
Off
like,
dude's ears.
what is he, like,
Minus-
65 now? I still wouldn't fight him at my age.
Minus his voice.
Oh yeah,
He has the most feminine voice
True.
that you will find.
Yeah.
Is he less of a man because of just simply his voice?
No.
not at all.
So I would say that having different qualities of feminine and masculine don't define what you are. And also, please go tell Mike Tyson that he is less of a man because of his voice.
His
Yeah.
voice just proves God has a sense of humor. I mean,
Exactly.
that's just
Man, he
guy jacked like he is, and then
Still.
squeaky voice.
would eat me for lunch.
Exactly.
So I would say that having the argument that you have to identify with all masculine qualities and or all feminine qualities to be that sex, it kind of doesn't make much sense, because I don't think that's about 75% or even more of the population would be able to uphold that.
And just by virtue of what I do as a pastor, I've sat down and I've talked with couples where the guy says, like, I'm more of the girl, quote unquote, in the relationship because I cry more. I'm more emotional. She's not, So that doesn't make him less of a man, and it doesn't make her less of a woman. It just means one's more emotional than the other. And what I think we've made the mistake of doing, and this is my opinion, this is not well researched, but I think this is correct. We've conflated male and female with masculine and feminine.
Yes.
Like, all right, so we need to separate those two things. So masculine and feminine are culturally conditioned. Okay, masculine and feminine are. So, like, there was a point where it was very masculine to wear a powdered wig and makeup.
Yes.
At one point.
Oh,
in
yeah.
history.
Oh, yeah.
Not today.
Yeah. Right.
So I think we need to understand that culture prescribes masculine and feminine. Our Creator prescribes male and female.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, and that was actually with my next point as well, which was culture defining what men and women are. For example, you could have a culture that says men. So let's say it's culture A, for example. So culture A defines what a man is somebody that hunts and somebody that builds structures.
Right.
They would define women as somebody that cooks and cleans. But culture B, men hunt and cook, and women in culture B build and clean.
Right.
So to define what
Interesting.
a man or a woman are based on culture alone doesn't make much sense, because culture A would define women as as cooking and cleaning, but culture B would define them as somebody that can build and somebody that can clean and somebody that can do more than just the two tasks described in culture A. And so I think relying on simply a cultural differentiation between the two of them is a flawed way to look at it, because it's no longer true when you move culture to culture.
Right.
So, and that's
So
that
it becomes
goes with-
a relativistic sort of worldview.
Exactly. And it kind of, I would say that that's something that we ascribe in most other forms of truth as well. Like certain cultures would say that cannibalism was okay. Cannibalism was a religious act in certain cultures.
Right.
But to move that to all cultures and say that this is grounded in reality and this is truth in every single culture is not something that goes on. And so I think that to describe identity and gender in a cultural sense doesn't work. I think it's a flawed way of thinking. I think it's a flawed way of arguing as well.
Right.
And then the final thing, and this is the big one that we see, that you will probably see the most of, is identity based on feelings. So to kind of go with this, I think that basing identity off of how you feel, or your gender off of how you feel, is very, very dumb. Because your feelings change. On a Friday after a long week of work, don't you feel great when there's like a football game on Sunday? There's, you're doing your favorite thing later that night. It's going to be a long weekend. It just, everything is going great over the weekend. You get this like emotional high, and your feelings feel 100% different than Monday morning when your football team lost.
Yep.
And it's another long week of work.
That was yesterday for us.
Yes, it was.
Yes. Time of this recording, the Bills lost to the Vikings.
It was kind of hilarious.
It was terrible.
It was hilarious. Not that they lost, but the way it was,
The way they lost.
the way that both the teams handled the last 10 minutes of the game. It was comical at that point.
Yeah, I was as emotional as a female after that. I will say that.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I would say that basing your reality on how you feel, especially when your feelings can change on a whim like that, it lacks the structure. And the other thing too is, if my feelings say that I am a woman, but your feelings say that I'm a man, whose feelings are superior in that argument? Whose feelings are right? Because if we have different feelings, and everybody does have different feelings about different stuff, some people will be able to relate, but they won't be able to relate 100% of the time.
Right.
It kind of brings in this argument of, if somebody says that my feelings are superior, it kind of brings in like the cultish, like totalitarianism kind of vibes, because it's telling people that your feelings are superior and therefore you are superior as a person. So I think that starting off, it may not sound like that, but I think moving forward, basing everything off of how you feel and what truth is off of how you feel is a scary road to go down, especially when it comes to identity and what you are.
Yeah, so I guess one of the thing I just jotted down as you said that is, it's one thing to, granted, I'm not a relativist in the sense that we discussed in an earlier podcast where we can just do whatever we want type thing. I do think we can relativize morality to God's commands. Go listen to the first podcast.
Right.
But one of the things I'm concerned with is someone saying, well, this is my sort of reference frame, and I can do whatever I want with it. And that's okay. It's not okay, but it's kind of crazy to a certain extent, where you just can't leave it there. And what I mean by that is, so much so that you have to change my reference frame to acknowledge your reference frame as true.
Right.
But as Bradley was saying, if things are just sort of relativized to my feelings and it's all about me and I should be able to do what I want to do, what is it about that doesn't make it hypocritical to force me to then identify my reality with the way you understand reality?
Right.
And I think that is incoherent if we sort of accept the first premise of it's all relativized reference frames and nothing you can do change what I feel or think. But that person, whatever they think and do, says I ought to recognize the truth of their relative frame, even if mine says it's not true. So I'm concerned with that overlapping and that sort of hypocrisy attached to it, where you ought to make someone else do something, but that person's reference frame can't direct yours.
Yeah, and
it's very strange to me.
My worry with the whole, feelings and like dictating your truth through feelings is at what point when somebody comes against your feelings, let's say, has a different point of view or feels something different, is it no longer just it's their opinion versus when because feelings change. If you have like a feeling of how reality is and somebody says something different, at what point are they attacking you?
Right.
Do you start to feel like?
Right.
Because I mean, it could very easily break into a fight, and then let's say at some point one person murders another person because they felt like it was the right thing to do.
Right.
At what point can we justify or not justify the murder?
Right. And that's why there needs to be a moral grounding that actually transcends somebody's feelings. There's lots of things I may feel at any given moment, but my faith in Christ is something that supersedes those feelings.
Yes.
Right? Like I might not feel like loving somebody, but Christ tells me to love my enemies and pray for those who persecute me.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going based on my feelings. That's a bad frame of reference to start with. But what happens is with this issue, with the gender identity issue, with really any type of identity issue, when you take away the moral grounding, what happens is it automatically creates incredible confusion in the heart and mind of the individual.
Right.
Like, I'll give you an example of how this plays out. Family member of mine, I want to be as vague as possible, used to work at a bookstore in the area, and she worked with an individual who identified as a gay man, biologically female, identified as a gay man, still likes men, but thinks she's a gay man. So she starts taking hormones. She starts going through the process of becoming a man in whatever sense that she could. But all of a sudden, and I don't know all the details behind the story, she realizes what she's doing and then decides, oh, wait, this is silly. I'm actually a woman. And then she comes back and she's now grounded in reality. But what I'm curious to understand, and I would love to sit down with this person and talk with her and say, like, what was going on in your heart and your mind that led you to go through the transition? And what sort of clarity did you get in your heart and mind that led you back to realizing, actually, I'm a biological female and my identity, my gender identity is congruent with that. It fits that.
Right.
That's what I'm curious to know. And I don't know enough people who actually transitioned and came back to really, to unpack that. But I'm sure there's lots of family of origin issues, mom issues, dad issues, what have you. So
one of the things I was talking to Mike earlier about that I don't know the answer to, and the best way is basically like, where is the causal direction of these terms? And let me best explain this with you. And listeners, try to picture this with me, because this is the best way I could try to picture it. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's the best way I can sort of like get it in the mind of the listeners. Because the question is, as Bradley rightly brought up, this idea of gender, right? We can either say, there's a few options. You can either say it's identical to biology, or there's a causal relation to it, meaning it's not the same, but still dependent on it, or not the same and not dependent on it. So there's like these multiple choices that we see in culture right now. And so the thing I can picture in my head, and I don't know the reason why this has been the way in culture, and I've yet to really have a good answer to this. So picture a triangle, right? There's two triangles. The triangle on the first triangle, the triangle on the left, has this idea of biology at its base. The second triangle, the triangle on the right, has biology as well. Because we all admit the foundational understanding is biology.
No.
No.
It's part of the new culture is that biology, that your feelings surpass biology.
But they're assuming gender is different than biology in that.
Yes.
So you automatically have to have a biological base. But you're right, though. I think their feelings determine the connection of gender to
I
biology.
would say that if you came up with an argument about biology, they would dismiss it.
Oh, well, that's not a good debate then.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah,
but I think that's true.
well, then
Yeah,
you're not dealing with an intellect at that
Because
point.
Ryan, so that's what I was talking about was like, having your feelings and like your reality
Right.
within your feelings, it comes back to that question of what is truth. Because if my truth and my reality, biology is completely separated from anything that I might feel.
So the claim you're making,
But
Bradley,
which is hilarious
that
because
emotions are at that base.
But your biology gives you your
Yes.
emotions.
It
So
does.
I don't know how in
But-
the world you can disregard biology. It makes no sense to me.
It doesn't, and that's part of the confusing thing here is
Right.
most
Makes no sense to
from
me.
what I've seen is that this question of gender is not meant to make sense.
Okay.
It's meant to be confusing
Right.
because the core basis of it is to get you to question what is truth. It gets you to question what you are.
Okay.
Because for thousands of years, people have gone along with, and rightfully so, said, I'm a man or I'm a woman,
Right.
based on biology and sex. And so if you can question something as simple as what is biology and sex, everything else becomes confused. And you
Okay.
can start to break
So-
down and question what everything else is. And whoever has the best sense of what is true, even if it's not
I don't know what that
necessarily-
even means. Whoever has the best sense of what is true if there is no truth. That makes no sense to me.
they can control what is
It's incoherent.
what
Yeah.
could be truth.
So let's assume, for the sake of my question,
Okay.
let's just start off by saying that gender and biology are different, and they both recognize that biology has some causal relation in their life, right?
You have a body.
You
right?
have a body.
Everybody has a body.
Your body is not identical to your gender.
Well-
They're different philosophical
Well,
categories.
and if you don't have a body,
How do you
it's
have
functioning game over.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you need the biology to have even these other terms because
Right.
without your body, you're literally nothing to even have any other thing.
I hope we could agree on that.
So we're going to start off at that presupposition, right?
then you don't exist, and then why are you arguing?
Yeah, exactly. So
but-
we're going to
But wait, before you continue there, I have seen multiple people try and debate with that mindset, but then they say, that's just your reality. And then what happens is
then you throw a pen at them and when they say ow, you say that's your reality too.
yeah. No,
Because you have a
I
body.
understand what you're saying, but I'm saying that breaking it down in like fact is no longer feasible because fact doesn't exist.
Okay, so let's assume for the sake of argument that we all sort of are in the same ballpark.
Okay.
Where we have biology, gender, and culture. Okay, let's just assume
Let's
for
do
the
that.
sake, because most people I talk to at least think they have a biology at bare minimum.
Let's say we have these three things. at
Okay,
work.
let's say we have these three things. So I picture two triangles. Both have the base of biology, right? And the next layer is either culture or gender. So triangle 1, the next layer is culture. Pyramid 2, the next layer is gender. If you think that gender and biology are different, you can still think that this causal relation of what defines gender is your biology. In the other triangle, there's this causal relation, but what defines culture is the biology. Does that make sense? And then the top of the pyramid is then culture defines gender, and on the other one, the culture has to have the causal relation where gender comes first. So on one pyramid, you have culture getting its information from biology and defining gender. On the other one, you have gender getting its understanding from biology, which then culture must then get defined from.
Right.
And most of the time when we hear things, at least when I say, is that culture defines gender, not gender defining culture.
Right.
And I have yet to hear a good argument why culture should define gender.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know one.
And that was
Why can't I think the other ones? Why
And
can't...
that was like partially my point where we're not supposed to be able to define gender.
I say throw out the term in my opinion.
Culturally, we can prescribe what maleness and femaleness looks like.
Right.
Like if it was culturally accepted to wear dresses for men and jeans for women, I'm not going around wearing a dress. It's not happening.
Right.
But what I'm saying, so like those things are fluid based on the culture that you live in. So,
Well, but that's what I'm saying is why is it the case that I should not think it's the other way?
right.
Where gender defines what culture understands that, not culture to understand what gender is.
Right.
And you can't have some sort of consensus theory of truth because I need to know what makes one of these true or not versus the other one.
And
And I don't know what grounding there is in this relativistic worldview to say this is the truth over this one.
yeah, and
Does that make sense?
with your
It's just
triangle,
all the individual.
Yeah.
with your triangle of individuality, I guess you could say.
Bless you.
Yeah. I would I would say that the big thing that's been happening is that your base affects how the rest of the triangle looks.
100%. It has to.
The problem that people are having today is that they're allowing the tippy top of their pyramid to affect how their base looks.
So like upside down.
Their pyramid is upside down.
Okay.
I see
And
what you're
so
saying.
it's causing this schism and what they define as everything. Like everything is messed up now because they are identifying. I tried to actually do a pyramid thing as well, but it became too much. But like the very top of the pyramid is too much. Or now I'm messing myself up. The very top of the pyramid is affecting the bottom. So your base, your foundation, your roof is affecting your foundation in a sense. And so it's causing all sorts of problems if the roof is telling telling the foundation what to do. Like the roof has no business telling the foundation what's going on.
Or to add onto your word picture here, Bradley, using the materials of a roof as if it's a foundation.
Sure, that too.
Yeah.
It ain't going to work.
Yeah, and then using the foundation as a roof.
Right. You're going to have problems.
Yeah. Interesting.
So as you were talking, having a spirited discussion about biology and whether or not we actually have bodies, which is amazing that some people are going to say that we don't.
Yeah, what are we, like weird Gnostics
it's amazing.
now? Like what's happening?
So, I mean, the heartbeat of this whole discussion is that we find our sense of truth. The very hinge point of reality itself is Jesus Christ, that he says he himself is the truth. And Jesus says some hard things around topics concerning gender identity.
Yes.
We don't think that he does, but he does.
Yeah.
Matthew 19, the Pharisees are doing what Pharisees do, and they're trying to trap Jesus, and they're saying to him, is it true that the law of Moses says that a man can divorce his wife for any and every reason? Jesus blows their argument out of the water, and in Matthew 19, verse 8, his disciples are with him as well. He says, because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so, and I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality and marries another, commits adultery. And the disciples said to him, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry. But he said to them, now this is following into what we're talking about here. Not everyone can receive this saying, but only those to whom it is given. Here's where he starts to talk about what we would consider today as I guess I would call it the people that step outside of the gender norms, so to speak, biological norms. Verse 12, for there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men. What is he talking about?
Castration.
Castration.
Yep.
And what is he talking about? Eunuchs who are eunuchs from birth. People who don't have the traditional male-female parts. Right? Is that a fair interpretive lens through that scripture? And there are eunuchs who have been eunuchs by men, made eunuchs by men. There are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this receive it. So, in one shot, Jesus is talking about marriage. He's talking about gender identity. He's talking about, obviously he's talking about sexual ethics, and he affirms the creation ordinance of marriage in this section, by the way. But he's making this really important distinction that, outside of talking about celibacy and things like that, he's actually acknowledging the fact that there are people that don't exist within these norms that we would have them. So like there are people who are born with non-traditional, with both male and female parts. There are people that for whatever reason, they may have been born male and they have female parts and vice versa. Yeah. I'm not saying that that's okay.
Yeah.
But Jesus was acknowledging those things that step outside of the norm in our culture. So I think it's important that we do recognize that that's the case. But Jesus lays out some clear moral parameters for those people as well.
Yeah, but
I think that's important.
It also seems if he's applying like there's exceptions, right? Then he's also by stating exceptions that there's a standardized understanding of things.
That doesn't throw out the standard.
Right, exactly.
That's
because
the
you
point.
Can't have exceptions without a standard.
Right.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
If everybody is the exception, there's no exceptions.
Right, exactly. So here's a thought I have for you guys, and we could talk about this a little bit because I have some a thought here. And it's going back to what Bradley said in the beginning. The question is, what then are we defining everything else by? Because Bradley, on your notes that you handed out to us, you said you have a good sort of catalog of ideas of what identity is made up of. Can I just read some of these?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure.
Read through them.
You said culture, personalities, social circles, friends, associates, enemies, how you feel, how others feel about you, education, both personal and institutional, physical and mental circumstances, parental upbringing, personal interests, personal insights, who or what you worship, right? And these all of these things sort of as a sum total come together to define our identity.
Can I just add to that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So there are definitely more categories than what I listed.
Yeah, it's not exhaustive. Yeah.
I ran out of stuff to say.
That's not exhaustive, I'm sure.
I did so much digging, and I kept finding stuff, and I was like, I'm just going to stick to these because these are the big ones.
I think this is a good list, Bradley.
Yes.
I would say it's a
so.
good list.
Some of them you'll see repeat as well. So culture, that comes up twice.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because certain things affect differently. Culture isn't just a one-way arrow towards you. It's a couple different arrows, if you will, that are coming at you from different directions. And same with education. I put both personal and institutional because I can find personal education in something that is completely pointless. Like how ketchup is made. But I can also be institutionalized through school or anything like that.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different ones that say different things but mean something similar. Even if they say the same thing, they do mean something different.
Sure. So
and these all intersect with one another too. They're not mutually exclusive. So
right. And I also I think we need to be careful two things. One, to avoid circular causality, and what I mean by that is how you feel helps you understand how others feel about you, but then how others feel about you help you understand how you feel, and then how you feel. We want to avoid that, right? So one of them has to be, in a sense, more foundational to the other, though there's an interplay.
So the reason why I have that is that, especially your feelings, how you feel. So how you feel can affect your personality, your personal identity.
Right.
I could feel like I'm the biggest Bills fan ever. And I could wear all Bills apparel because I feel like I'm a great Bills fan.
Right.
Or I could feel I'm the nicest person in the room. But others could say to me, you are awful. We hate you.
Right.
And that will affect how I feel as well. So it is a causality.
Right.
But it does affect your identity because how you feel and how others feel about you can influence how you get treated and how your identity is affected.
And that is particularly true in the teen years.
Absolutely.
Because the thought pattern with most teenagers, maybe there's some exceptions, but if we're talking about identity, who I am, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yes.
So whatever perceptions I have that you have towards me, that's what's shaping my identity.
Yes.
So if I think other people think I should be gender confused,
I'm shaping my identity.
I'm going to shape my identity around that.
Yeah.
So there's more and more children and teenagers who are saying, "Oh, I'm identifying as this different gender," because the culture is just drifting in that
Yes.
direction, and
Right.
they think this is what I need to do to fit in with this current culture.
Right.
And so, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off again.
No.
But to go with that, I put friends, associates, and enemies. So friends and associates, the big problem that we're seeing is that, especially kids in school right now, like you're finding that Gen Z is like, it's like 20% right now more LGBTQ than millennials are. So like if millennials were at 10%, Gen Z is at like 30 something percent, which is nuts because it's the biggest jump in history, like even during like Roman times.
Right.
And so I included friends and associates there because your friends and associates will affect how you act. Same with social circles. Like social circles, I'm more identifying as like activities, like things that you partake in, and social circles. So like let's say you are really into football. So social circle would be football, but then your friends and associates inside of football would also affect. But I wanted to put enemies there too, because one of the big things with kids in school now is that bullying is like not there in the traditional sense of bullying being there. And I think that bullies kind of ground you in reality, and enemies ground you in reality. Having like a challenge or an obstacle in the way puts you in the correct mindset to a sense. And I'm not saying that there should be bullying or anything like that.
But it does build character.
It builds character. It keeps you grounded. I know one of the big things going around now, and I think we talked about this before, was like, I think they're called Furbies, but they're like the kids that identify as an animal.
Furries.
Furries, not furries.
No. Furries is a different thing.
Oh, okay.
Furries are people that like to dress up in animal costumes.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
That's a very old thing.
Furbies are the creepy toys
It's a
from the
toy.
90s
Okay.
or something
Yeah.
like that.
There's
That woke me up at 3 a.m. wanting fake food. Feed me. It's like, whoa. Whoa.
but they're kids that like will like woof or like meow in class, and that they demand like a litter box to use like the restroom. Like it's really like crazy. But 5-10 years ago, if you came to school with cat ears on and you were a guy, you were getting a swirly or a wedgie.
Swirly.
To say
Like
the least.
you know, like that was the least you were getting. You would get bullied into submission, and then all of a sudden you'd end up like the rest of the
Kids in my
class.
school would have made you eat cat food.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
So back to the first point Bradley made in the podcast, because we just read this makeup of this list of things that help define our identity, I think we could put it.
Right.
The question that I think is most important is, do we have a ground for all of these things? Or what sort of primitive worldview lens are we interpreting these things through? So if our social circles say, this is how I feel of you, we don't just freely interpret that and say that's true. We have a lens for which we take these things and almost digest them and filter them through to know if it's true or not, or how to understand it, right? And you just can't say it's identity, because if that makes up our identity, it seems like this lens is more primitive than our understanding of identity. So I think what's important is to ask these questions, like, what is this ground to allow these things to define you or form your identity, right? If you don't have any, I think you're in trouble. But if you have one, like for instance, the Christian worldview, where we go back and our identity is made in God's image for the specific design and role that He has created us for, this sort of ground makes us look at these other things and interpret them through that understanding, versus the culture helping define what it means to be made in God's image, right? There's like this directional path that the Christian worldview specifically states. So I think, in my point of view, I think nowadays, because the gender term is so hotly debated, that as soon as you put gender on like your YouTube title, you're automatically going to get views, and this algorithm is going to put you up because of this term. But I once again, I think we're asking the wrong question, in my opinion, because if you say, oh, there are no grounds, well, then I have you in my arguments. you know what I mean? I think that's just the unfortunate conclusion of it. Now, I had some thoughts on this, so I want to hear your guys' opinion on this sort of belief when it comes to this gender and a biological understanding. And this is sort of how I see the Christian worldview. And for those who are Christian listening to this, I think this might be helpful. I think I could elaborate on it more, but for the time, I need to think through it more and all that wonderful stuff.
Right.
And so what I think is needed for the Christian to help understand this difference between gender and biology, if you want to separate the two, right? If you think they're identical, then there is no really problem here. You can just go to one part of this thought. But say you think there's a difference, right? What I think is needed for the Christian to help the world understand why the gender or outward appearance is important, right? And there needs to be what I call an objective purpose for your outward display that's intrinsically attached to your biological makeup. Because if I think we can have an objective purpose for our outward cultural appearance, or what they would understand gender, depending on what pyramid you want to look at, then we can't do whatever we want with our outward appearance and definitions that fall into this gender because it's intrinsically connected.
Well, and to build off of that, tell me if this is where you're heading.
Yeah.
I'm trying to interpret it as best as I can. So if you are born as a male, in the traditional sense, you have male reproductive parts. You're born female with female reproductive parts.
Yeah, not extreme circumstances.
There are exceptions, obviously, right? That happens. It's rare, but it happens.
But it happens, yeah.
Jesus acknowledges that,
and we
right?
do that on a case-by-case basis
Yes,
at that point. Yeah.
Yes, of course. But given that you are born with the reproductive parts, male and female, that has a very clear, distinct purpose.
Correct.
You change that, it renders that part of you purposeless.
Sure. I'm going even one step farther.
Okay.
I'm saying that your outward appearance that culture understands has an intrinsic objective attachment to your biological makeup. And if that's the case, it doesn't matter. Like if gender defines, like you said, maleness to have powdered faces and powdered wigs on, and that's how culture understands maleness, that still has an attachment intrinsically and objectively to your biological. So
I see what you're saying.
And
now.
so
okay.
So what I would say is,
this is what males do. This is what females do. There's a distinction.
Yes.
Okay.
And so what I want to do is I want to place it in the God-given grounded roles that man and women, biological male, biological female, have in the relationship of what God is doing through salvation. And I would say it this way. And I think, once again, I spend more time on this argument. I would say this. Your outward appearance connects to a role in which God has assigned to your biological sex. And what I would even go farther. Let me give you an example. This would bring an outward recognition of this biological role. And what I mean by that is, you're not forming false beliefs in others due to your appearance that would cause a miscategorization of your biological role in God's design. So if culture defines male to be blue, then if you're biologically male, that cultural definition of maleness has an intrinsic objective attachment to the biological. So you should fit the outward appearance from what culture attaches to the biological aspect.
Right.
Because it will it would form false beliefs of a miscategorization by just the outward opinion of what your intrinsic role is in God's plan of salvation.
It'll cause people in the culture to draw false conclusions about who you are.
Not only who you are, but the role God has designed you from.
Correct.
That's intrinsically and objectively attached to your biological position.
Right.
And if that is true, which I think I can argue through many of examples, then it seems from a Christian worldview that if culture says men wear pink, you shouldn't purposely do the opposite to make yourself look like the opposite gender role, because there will be this formation of a false belief that's misconstrued of your biological role.
Right.
So if that's the case, which I think you can, in Timothy when Paul talks about long hair on men and female and shows it within God's role, strictly dedicated to the understanding of their functioning within the plan of salvation, right? I think we can make an argument where even if gender is separated from biology, and say culture defines what gender is, right? We can still say it doesn't matter because there's this objective intrinsic attachment to the biological nature of us.
Right.
And if that's true, I think it's important that we stand firm in what we believe when it comes to how we portray ourselves, even with outward appearance. So what do you guys think of that?
Yeah, that's good.
No, I
was thinking hard that. Like, I would want to think more hard about that, but it's at least an interesting first start
to
think about.
Just as like a closing note from me, I guess, would be with all these points.
My paper's messy.
I see that. With all these points on like identity that I listed, like culture, like how you feel, stuff like that. All those points are not standalone from your foundation.
Correct.
So traditionally, what foundation has been biology, and Christians, we would establish biology as part of the foundation, but we would establish our foundation in Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ, and even like Judeo-Christian values would establish as God being the foundation. Right. And so your identity is built off of your foundation. So one of the big things why we haven't seen this is because biology has been the foundation. Biology and even like cultural honor has been the foundation. So like, you take any big like culture from any time in history that like tradition and honor has been like, I mean, you can take Japan, for example, like, Japanese honor is a huge thing. So that has been part of their foundation. And so their identity has been built off of that foundation rather than taking one portion of what makes up identity and selecting that as their foundation. And so like what's happening now is that people are taking one little thing that influences your identity and making it their identity. So
I see what you're saying.
I think what people are saying when they say, I feel this way, they're going off of personality. So they're saying my personality is now my identity. So, which, I mean, if that's how people feel, like God help them, because like how putting your identity in how you feel is awful, or putting your identity in how other people feel about you is awful.
Yeah, that's going to be...
Or in culture. Culture shifts all the time.
It's going to be a difficult life.
It's a difficult life, and it's a difficult way to ground yourself as well.
Right.
Like you're never going to find the happiness that you seek because you don't have a foundation to seek happiness on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other things that this topic of gender identity intersects with. It intersects with how parents raise their kids, which is a topic that we're dedicating to in the podcast. It intersects with mental health, which is another topic that we're going to be discussing in the podcast as well. So we're not going to be able to get into all of the nuances of this particular issue, but hopefully we're able to give you as listeners some food for thought to consider as you're interacting with those who are perhaps questioning their gender.
Okay, and then I'll just do the outro real quick.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening to that episode on identity. We hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next week for an episode on mental health. So we hope to see you there.